Welcome to episode 3 of the Mental Wellness Limited Series from Keep Your Stride Healing Gives Clarity. This episode, the focus is mindful evolution, and our guest today is Valerie Carmel Dorsainvil. I started this whole series based off of my own personal journey of embracing my mental wellness. I've been a professional development strategist for over 10 years, and during that time of helping people from working in career services to volunteering in different career events and helping different organizations build their career development and professional development platform, it was just organic for the conversation to include mental wellness, include talks about imposter syndrome, include things of anxiety and managing stress. And so, with that, working with different professionals, I became a student of my own work in many ways, just on my own evolution as a professional, but also it led me to therapy myself. And so, once I started going to therapy, I was like, this is essential for any professional to keep their stride, right? So, keep their stride. So this is where my initiative came from, my own journey of helping others, eventually helping myself and embracing mental wellness. And now I'm on a mission to help other professionals, amazing professionals like you listening and watching, to keep your stride. So this series is Healing Gives Clarity. And I'm really excited to have Valerie Carmel Dorsainvil with us this evening to just share what that means. And so let me tell you a little bit about Valerie. When you're as passionate and knowledgeable as Valerie Carmel Dorsainvil, guiding high achieving Black women over stress and trauma to the highest selves is all in a day's work for her. As a licensed clinical social worker and the founder and CEO of Valerie Carmel Therapy LLC, Valerie has provided countless African American and Caribbean American professional women with the tools they need to reclaim control of their own narratives. I mean, what a blessing is that? Her uncanny ability to deeply see, hear, and guide her clients empowers them to thrive mentally and emotionally well beyond their therapy sessions. So, welcome, Valerie.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle, for the invitation. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes. Okay. So, what does mindful evolution mean to you as a therapist?
To me, mindful evolution is about being intentional in the way that we approach our growth experience. So much of our growth oftentimes is somewhat just organic through life experiences and situations that come up. But being mindful about it means that you are intentional in the directions and the activities that you are doing as part of that growth process.
I love that because I think sometimes when we think of that, we might think of it as a goal, but sometimes not always about the way we choose to live our life well.
Yeah. One of the things, like a misconception that many of my clients will come to me with is this idea of like, well, I want to be healed, period. And I have to change that perspective for them and help them recognize that healed is not a final destination. It is a process. Because just as soon as you heal one area or feel like you have one area under control, there's now going to be a different area of your life that is now going to need, some assistance and some focus, because our lives we don't get to press pause, go deal with something and then come back as if, everything just stayed as is. So while you're healing an area, life is still lifing, and there are other things still occurring that you may now have to recognize actually now needs your attention. So healing is a process. There is not a healed period.
It's interesting that you're sharing that. I remember hearing a statement one time with someone that was at a career fair, and they were saying that they were working on getting over career grief. They wanted to get healed from it. And the person doing the mock interview with them said, don't let that become your story. Your tragedy becomes a moment in time that's trauma for you to become your story over the skills you bring to the role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that
Yeah, I
because
had to
it's
take that in. I was like,
yeah, because I think we we unmeaningly, like just kind of out of just our pure innocence of trying to help understand our lives, we tend to slap a label on something. And sometimes, if we are not careful, we will end up building a monument to something that we actually didn't even want in our life in the first place. And then now it takes up so much room and so much space in our lives, we feel like we can't let it go because it has now become a part of our story. When in reality, it's it is it's a part of the journey rather than making it feel like it was a full stop experience in life that transpired. So I feel like that's an important thing to really kind of be mindful of moving forward, that
I
you
love
don't have to
that.
build a monument to this experience. It can just be a stepping stone
In the journey.
and
I
in the
love it.
journey.
I love that. So how do you create time and space to make healing a priority and build a purpose-filled life?
I feel like people would probably want to hear something very overly complex with lots of steps, but it's actually not as hard as we think that is. The things that we actually have to do are pretty simple. What's complex is our individualized approaches to getting there. So, it, the first thing you really want to do is you just got to be aware. So, self awareness is like my number one thing that every client that I work with learns. The approach that I take in working with them is self awareness, self care, and self growth. Those are the three areas that we ultimately focus on in that experience. So you have to understand, what does it take for you to function at your highest level? And then also, what does the bare minimum look like for you to function at at a great level? Because I think in so many spaces we like to be very gung ho about our approach. And well, this is the thing that I need to do every single day to be top notch. But the reality is, nobody is working at 100% every single day. Some days I'm at 90, honey. Some days I'm at 75. Some days I'm at 40. And that's just the reality of how I show up. And so, what does that bare minimum need to look like? And what does the top tier of your version need to look like? So, and all of that really just comes from awareness. The next thing is really trying to figure out, how do you incorporate those elements into your life. So if you are a person who needs, peace in the morning, but you like a hectic afternoon, like, how do you set up your life to reflect those things? You can't say that you're a person who needs to um, love water, right? As an example, because I love the beach. But if you actually never take the time to be around water, then how does that benefit you? How is it serving you in terms of you showing up in your best form? So you need to know what you need, but then you actually need to create the space to incorporate that into your life. And the last part is actually just to continue to assess and change. What you may have needed in 2021 may be very different than what you need in 2024. So don't be afraid to like switch it up, remove things off the list that probably may have served you well in that version of you, but maybe it no longer serves this current version of you. And so being able to just be open to the fact that you're going to have to change it and, rearrange some things as life progresses, accept that as being part of the process. So it sounds very, I don't know, overly simplified, but actually the process is it's just us as humans who like to overcome more fluffy and overly complex because it makes us feel like we've accomplished something, but in reality, nah, it's simple.
I love that you reiterated create space in different ways. Like, just make room for it. Let it just inch in and overwhelm you
Yeah,
over time.
we get so, I think, especially as a Black woman, I am very aware of the perspective that other people have of me when I walk into a room, right? Especially within the career that I have, oftentimes I'm usually the only Black face in the room, or I'm the only person who is either, Caribbean or of Haitian descent in the room. And so having that been my experience for so much of my career, it almost gives you become somewhat overly, you try to overcompensate for it in certain aspects of of your career, and being very in tune with how other people perceive you. And a lot of that comes from just the fear of, do I actually belong in this room, and trying to prove yourself and do all the, and jump through all the mental Olympics, as I call it, that we tend to do every time we're about to like embark on a new experience. But it really doesn't have to be, that complicated. It really just starts with taking the time to be in tune with who you are and what you like, what you don't like, and being accepting of the answers that you get. Sometimes the answer that we give ourselves or we acknowledge may not be the answer that we thought we wanted. And then here comes our inner conflict of like, no, but I want to get up and I want to be able to wake up at 5 a.m. and like do sun salutations and, journal for 30 minutes and work out and do all these things. But that may not be how you're set up. So why consistently try to force yourself into an experience that does not fit the core of who you are? You got to accept it without judgment.
Everything you said was just needed. Like, yes, ma'am. It's a need. And you know what, when it comes to being in the room, I think that applies to so many people in so many ways. Mm-hmm. What are some things that they can tell themselves when they're processing that if they're in the room, they're meant to be in the room? How can they quiet those voices?
For me, I did a lot of positive affirmations that I created for myself. And I made it a point to make sure that it spoke to my own personal fears of how people would perceive me or whatever my internal barriers were, because we all have them, whether we acknowledge that they exist or not. And so creating affirmations of things that I would say to myself before I stepped into the room was helpful. And all of the things that I would do to help kind of calm myself and feel good about myself. So sometimes it would be a quick call with a friend who would like hype me up real quick and be like, girl, you got this. Like, if I, sometimes we need, oftentimes we forget that it's okay to ask for help. Right? We think that we have to do it all by ourselves, but the reality is the people who are closest to us want us to succeed as much, if not more, than we want to ourselves. So being sure that you have those kind of people in your life that you can call and be like, hey, I'm about to walk into this meeting. Like, I'm nervous, and let them pour into you. That's okay. Right. And sometimes, if that's not what I need, like, it kind of just depends on the vibe that I'm in. Sometimes music is a big deal for me. So I listen to a lot of that before I walk into a room. And, sometimes it's gospel. Sometimes it might be, Beyonce. Sometimes it's J. Cole. Sometimes it's Trick Daddy Dollars. Like, it could really be. I mean, I am from 305, so I have to throw that out there. So, like, it really kind of depends on the gamut of the experience, because every time I show up, what I need is different. It's not always going to be exactly the same, and being okay with honoring whatever it is that I need in the moment.
Shout out to Florida.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. So your demographic focus is Black women. Mm-hmm. And what do you want Black women to embrace about therapy?
Oh my gosh, there's so many things. I think the most important thing that I want Black women to embrace about therapy is that therapy is part of your self-care. It is just like you making time to go get a mammogram, to go get, a pap smear with your gynecologist, to go get, your blood pressure checked. It is part of your well-being. Don't look at it as if it is this kind of like thing that I only do because I'm in crisis. I want therapy to become a natural part of the way that we care for ourselves. Most people don't realize that there's a wide range of how frequently you can actually go to therapy. Some people think like, oh, if I'm not going once a week, then it doesn't count. No, not necessarily. I have clients who I've seen every other week. I have clients I only saw once a month, and it was more for as part of their maintenance, part of their maintenance experience. After we've kind of worked through quite a few things, now it's like we're just do a quick check in just to make sure, like, do you feel like you're still on the right track? Have other things changed? And sometimes that we may go for monthly for several weeks or several months, but there are times where everything is fine for 4 and 5, 6 months, and then all of a sudden, life happens, and now there's like a new stressor, and it's like, okay, well, I knew the tools that I had worked for those things, but maybe now with this new situation, those tools that I learned no longer fit, or they no longer are effective. They're not as effective as they once were. So now maybe we need to switch things up. So I think it's important for Black women especially to really look at going to therapy as literally just part of your own self-care. We have so many stressors that are very particular, I'm going to say with that word, to our particular demographic. And so being sound in your mind and emotions ultimately impacts everything else that we do. Our mindset and our emotions impact how we spend money, what relationships we engage in, what relationships we don't, the jobs we pick, the food we eat, how we treat our body, how we treat everybody else. And all of that is coming from something that is internal to you. So if you are not in tune with how that is impacting you, you may not realize how so much of that is actually spilling out into so many other areas of your life. So I want us to look at it. I want us to look at therapy differently. Like it's just part of us taking care of ourselves.
I feel like you needed a megaphone for that whole response. I regret not starting therapy sooner.
Same. And that's coming from a therapist. I didn't start going to therapy until I was almost 40. And it wasn't because there weren't periods of my life that I should have been in therapy. There absolutely was. But again, I think coming from a Caribbean culture that did not really promote mental wellness, right? It wasn't necessarily a thing. Although, like in my family, I could talk about how I feel, and I have close relationships with my parents as well as with other family members. Therapy wasn't this big thing to go to, right? It just wasn't a conversation that we really embraced and discussed. And so now that it wasn't until I started having panic attacks that I actually had to go to, like, I was like, nah, this is not it. This is not how I want to live my life. And so we got to fix this. And while panic attacks are not an enjoyable experience for anyone who has ever had them, you know what I'm referring to. But honestly, starting to have panic attacks is what literally changed my life. It made me different because I realized I was not doing it as well as I should have been. And that led to a path of starting my practice. It led to me becoming certified in treating anxiety. It led to me writing a book. Like, so many things came from that experience that it ultimately shifted the trajectory of my life. So even in something that ultimately was uncomfortable and completely unwanted in my life experience, it actually worked out really well for me and honestly for countless others. So it was
Thank
great.
you for being so transparent. I appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I think therapists like yourself, well, therapists in general, but not everyone shares their stories, but it helps someone like me who was reluctant to start therapy. And now, like I said, I regretted not starting sooner, but then I shifted that. I'm still in the process of shifting that narrative, saying I'm so grateful I was able to start when I did, because it makes my future even better, as far as aging well and sane and just enjoying life, like you said, avoiding the anxiety of things. And I thank you for that. I just want to say thank you.
Oh, well, you are most welcome. I'm really transparent about my own mental health challenges because I realize there was so much shame that I experienced when I was having panic attacks. It was something that I really hid and I really didn't tell anyone until they got to the point like I was breaking down at work and I was like, I can't even get through my workday. Um, and so, and I realized like I'm no good to anyone in this state, especially not myself. Um, and I think working through that shame and working through some of the stigma and the fear of like the judgment of how are you going to be a therapist helping somebody else when you can't help yourself kind of mentality. There was just a lot of self-judgment. There was a lot of like critique of like my own choices and what are you doing? Maybe you're not good enough. Maybe like just all the, all the junk that kind of like plays in our minds when we don't show up in a way that we thought we were going to. And when you are literally rocking and like feeling like wild horses are about to run through your chest, you can't focus on anything else. And it made me realize like, this is not it. Like, this is not the way that God intended me to live my life.
So
And
that
in
oxygen
hindsight, I
mask on
feel
you
like,
first.
oh yeah, like, I got to save myself first. And so in hindsight, I realized that it actually made me a better therapist, because when I'm talking to women and I'm kind of like asking them questions and I'm getting the sense like, oh no, you are having a panic attacks and you just don't want to call it that, you want to call it your nerves bad. Well, okay, well, we can do that. But let me share with you outside of this professional role what this looks like as a person. And when I'm able to kind of share with them a little bit of my own realities of, anxiety is a real thing, like, but it doesn't mean you have to stop your life and, you got to go hide somewhere and not do anything. No, there is a way to work through it. And I think that actually is ultimately a gift for me, because it lets people see that no matter how put together somebody may look on the outside, how great their bio looks when you read it, no matter how great their social media looks with all the pictures, we're still humans at the core. And there's so much about every single one of us that other people never really get to see. And that for me was important in building my practice, to make sure that I was as transparent with them as possible if I wanted them to be the same with me, right? For them to be able to reciprocate that and feel like, okay, yeah, she got the letters and she knows the experience. So as you're talking about it, I get it. You don't have to, try to create too many words to make it make sense to me. I understand some of the experience.
100%. So, what are strongholds and how do you help your clients release them?
That's an interesting word to me. Because I think when I hear it first, I think more from like a biblical side of things, right? These experiences or issues that basically have such a strong hold on us. But as a clinician, I realize most of the things that have a hold on us is really because we're holding on to it.
So true.
Right? Like, we're really actually holding on to it, holding on to this belief structure, holding on to this narrative, this expectation that our family, our friends, our community, our whoever, has for us. And so we hold on to this thing and try to make that be who we are when it may not actually resonate. And part of that, I think, is where so much of the internal distress comes from, especially for entrepreneurs and Black female entrepreneurs. We are the fastest growing demographic of entrepreneurs, but we're also the demographic who is getting the least amount of funding, the least amount of support, and also are oftentimes juggling the maximum amount of the stress, right? 30% of the households in America are of Black families are single parent households, right? So if you're a single parent household who's already has a full-time job and now you're starting a side hustle to try to grow your business, that doesn't that doesn't lead to less stress, that creates more stress. So there are already so many things that are kind of impacting our experience. But I think in helping us work through the strongholds is for us to get the clarity as to what they are in the first place. Everybody's is different. And by having conversations and doing different activities and kind of exploring like our thought processes and the life experiences that we have with the people, our primary caregivers and what that looked like, that is where we really begin to understand what strongholds have we created or have been passed down to us. Some of it is not even our stuff. Like it's stuff from like my mama and my grandma, and like they have these perceptions, and now it's just been generationally passed down to me, and now I have to figure out in 2024 how to hold true to the statement that may not even apply. So I think working through and becoming honest with ourselves about what are the things that we're holding on to is really important. And secondly, helping people understand it's okay to let it go. Like it doesn't, I think so many times we have these strongholds because we think this is the only way for us to achieve the goal that we have. And my favorite saying to my friends is there is more than one way to make $1. So if that is the case, then there has to be more than one path to me to get to my goal, regardless of whether that goal is financial security, regardless of that is a relationship, whether it is professional development. There are multiple ways for us to get to that goal. It doesn't have to be the one version that we were told has to be the outcome. So I think working through that and helping people to become clear about what their strongholds are and learning to be okay with letting them go is probably the most important aspect of the work, but it's also the most complex part of the work, because we don't realize how much of that stuff is like ingrained into the nitty gritty of the way we function. So trying to peel back some of those layers and kind of dig through it usually leaves people in their feels by the end of the session. And then then people are, usually will be like, I don't know if I want to come back next week, but they do. They do. It's just that, you just it becomes too raw in terms of the experience to dig through so much of that. And then you start going through a place of like, well, who in the world am I really if so much of this, do I even know who I am? Because so much of this isn't even coming from me. So that's part of like the experience that you get from going to therapy, is having a person who is completely unbiased, you don't have to prove anything to, who really is just helping you unravel some of these complex strings that are like building this like chaotic ball in your mind, and having somebody help you sift through it is like the beauty of therapy.
Indeed. It made me think of I don't know if it's a parable, but a story where it was like a holiday dinner, and this lady bought like, let's say, a 20-pound turkey, and her husband, and she put the turkey in the pan, and she cut the turkey off and put the turkey in the pan, and then put that, put the what she cut away, she discarded it. Her husband was like, you're wasting turkey, like that's food waste, like why are you throwing that away? And she's like, well, my nana did it. So her husband was so put out, he was like, well, let's call Nana, which was her mother, and ask her, why did she do that? So she said, well, my mom did it. So they called the mom. She was still around, thank goodness. They called the mom and they said, Mom, why did you do that? Was there a reason? And she was just like, the pan was not big enough, so I had to cut the turkey. So 3 generations of women are cutting this turkey, to your point, right? You're doing things habitually because that's what you saw, but didn't know the roots of it, right? And it's we've been throwing away turkey all this time because
right. And the reality
mom didn't have a big enough pot for it.
Didn't have a big enough pan. And like, think about how generations and how many years of Thanksgiving turkeys, right? We have been, massacring, essentially,
Yeah.
right? Deforming, when really all we needed was a bigger pan. Like, the solution was really simple. That solution is so simple. It's us as humans who tend to make it a lot more complex because of our own perspectives and like our own situations. And we think like, oh yeah, this makes sense right now, but we never kind of explain it for the next person to say, this is the way that I did it, but that doesn't mean that you have to do it like this. Think about how differently the following generations would have shown up if that was the explanation given, right? Like, it was such a simple thing, but look how many times people are sticking to it, even over a turkey. So like, think about deeper things that we do that with. So that is a great story, and I'm gonna have to steal that from you at some
You
point.
go right ahead. You just take that on and make it yours.
I love
So
that.
I do want to know, would you please tell us about the power of a win wall?
Oh, one of my favorite things to do. And I actually have one in my home office that I redo usually once a year, but I kind of keep track of the things that I want to put on there. So basically, a win wall is a visual representation of all of the things that challenge your beliefs and narratives and preconceived notions of all the things that you're afraid of. So what you do is that you're actually creating space to write down your actual wins. So the things that you have accomplished, the things that you're proud of, and usually I write a little bit of what things were relevant to it and the connections that I made throughout the year that really supported so many of the wins. And what that does is, in moments when we are faced with a new challenge, right? We're like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I've never done this situation before. I've never been here before. I don't know what to do. Maybe I'm not, then, imposter syndrome starts to kick in. Maybe I don't know. And maybe, I shouldn't be here. Do I belong in this room? Blah, blah. But when you can look at a wall that literally represents all of the things you have been able to accomplish, overcome, barriers, all the things, it is a visual reminder of how much of a badass you actually are, which sometimes we forget. We forget the things that we have been able to overcome. And having that visual representation not only serves as the thing to challenge some of those negative beliefs and thoughts that we have about ourselves, but also can oftentimes be a catalyst to the problem solving of how to overcome this situation. You may have forgotten that you made this particular connection or that you had overcome a situation that was somewhat similar, because panic starts to, makes memories kind of fuzzy, and then we only remember like the bad things because that's like the trajectory that we're on. But having the win wall allows you to shift the perspective. So you're not focused on all the things that have gone wrong. You're literally looking at a list of all the things that have gone right.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, Valerie, do you have any parting thoughts or wisdoms or things that you would like for us to consider moving forward as we navigate to keep our stride to staying mentally well?
I would say, I would encourage everybody to take some time for themselves. Like, I think in this world that is so constantly busy and we're always so accessible to so many people all the time, it drowns out your own inner compass because there's so much distraction. And I think if we could spend, it doesn't ultimately matter the amount of time, 5, 10 minutes, it doesn't really matter. But doing it so that you can actually hear your own self think and have a streaming thought process that is uninterrupted. There is so much wisdom inside of each and every single one of us that we never actually get to tap into because there's so much distraction. So if there's one thing that will help you keep your stride, is to actually spend some time by yourself and just kind of just listen to what is actually on your heart and mind. And you will be surprised how much wisdom comes from those little moments.
I love that. Simple and effective. Thank you. And let everyone know how they can get in touch with you if they want to work with you or just connect with you and share some feedback from this episode.
Oh, absolutely. You can find me on Instagram at the Valerie Carmel. You can find me on LinkedIn as with the same handle, as well as on Facebook. And for those who prefer to just send email instead, you can send me an email at info@valeriecarmel.com.
Love it. And you can find me, Michele Beatty, on LinkedIn and Keep Your Stride on Facebook and Instagram. And YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to the final installment of this mental wellness series with episode 4 with Natasha Darkangelo. And that episode is focusing on the cost of caring, compassion fatigue. So thank you so much and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Bye, everyone.